Σεβασμιότατοι,
Your Eminencies, Reverend Fathers, dear colleagues, President, what a surprise to see you. We also see politicians in such conferences, not very often, but we do. Dear brothers, perhaps it would be better for me to leave my presentation aside, in written form that is, and say things that are more substantial, because many things were said before, but I shall not do this. And that is the reason why I shall read to you what I have prepared already. There is an epistemic side to what I'm going to say, but I think that this is necessary for us to be able to delve into our thinking. So I shall endeavor some theological clarifications that are broached again anew as questions because of the introduction of artificial intelligence. Let it be noted, however, that some of these problems and some of these queries are posed because of the spectacular progress made in the field of neurobiology in this day and age. We shall describe these questions in summary and endeavor some theological answers. Let it be noted that neurobiology, when it is understood correctly, may constitute a natural ally for theology today. There are three benefits or anthropological data that theology can gain from today's neurobiology. The first one regards the ontologically psychosomatic nature of man. The second one has to do with a deeper definition of the soul that can clarify and extend some of the most broad patristic insights. And the first one has to do with the fundamental importance of the unconscious mind in its biological form and other forms in order to define what is human. A fourth benefit is related to the neurobiological phenomenon of meta-representation, which we shall explain. It constitutes the human way of epistemic approach of reality. For us to understand the first, suffice it to examine as an example the two opposite epistemic systems of ancient Greek philosophy, those of Plato and Aristotle. For the former, the knowledge is the memory of things that the soul saw as it descended to the body. In the Platonic realm, that is, or the Hyperuranian, that is, it precedes and is inscribed in human conscience. For the latter, for Aristotle, knowledge is empirical, and it comes from correlating experiences that the mind understands. What today's data, as experts note, the general ability of the brain to create representations of what is outside is inherent, and this goes hand in hand with tabula and scripta of Plato. The fact that these maps are created as a result of experience is something that is in accordance with Aristotle. More specifically, the position of Plato reflects the existence of neuronal circuits and inherent information genetically codified in the topology of those circuits, while Aristotle says that there are differences in the synapses among the neurons. So there is a purely biological basis regarding processes that were regarded as mental in the past. A second random example from the realm of neurophysiology. In the inferior parietal lobule, we have the supramarginal gyrus that leads to mental subtraction, and the angular gyrus that enables people to use tools. If it is destroyed, people cannot use any tool, and this is called apraxia. These activities would be regarded by Descartes, for example, together with the construction of words, as mental alone, only mental. But we know today that this is not correct. The loss of part of the brain means that we lose part of our cognitive functions, as it happens with the artificial stimulation or distraction of places of the brain that leads to certain strange behaviors. And up until recently, we regarded all these things as mental diseases, but they are other diseases with a biological background. Hysteria, which was studied by Freud, for example, was a notable case in point. The creation of different ideologies and pseudo-philosophies is attributable not to choice, but the strong neurobiological tendency of the brain to embellish and to generalize, even if the data are insufficient in order to interpret reality for sure. And experts call this cerebral confabulation. This and many other examples, on one hand, prove that the body is tantamount to ontology for man, as in Maximus the Confessor and Thomas of Aquinas had said, and St. Gregory Palamas. And there is also the material soul part and brain. We can code the philosophical models and number 8 of them. First of all, dualism, the independent existence of the two as totally distinct. Second, the theory of interaction between them. Third, parallelism, that is harmonization between the two, like two clocks showing the same time without one influencing the other. Fourth, monism, the theory that there is only one single substance and it is called either material or of the soul. Fifth, materialism, full inexistence of the soul. Sixth, subjective idealism, whereby only the soul exists, while the natural world is a representation of the soul. Seventh, the theory of identity, where both the soul and cerebral function are the same thing. And eighth is the theory of emergent property, as they call it, emergent property position, whereby the soul emerges as a new property of matter when it reaches a high level of self-organization. The problem is that in neither of the above models does the existence of soul get proven as necessary, and its existence, as neurobiologists complain, is something that they describe by means of axioms arbitrarily. The usefulness does not come from a dire neurobiological necessity. Personally, however, I think that it is. The basis for a convincing solution lies in the distinction between mental, natural, and vital that St. John of Damascus endeavored. He regards natural and vital forces of the body, like the nurturing one, the growth one, the spermatic, the cardio-neural, as involuntary, that is unconscious. We'll need to come back to this term. He believes those of the soul as functions that have to do with freedom. They are at our discretion. So the essence of the soul is the full, according to paternal tradition, freedom of motion as the essence of reason. So we're talking about self-agency, because man, according to St. John of Damascus, is reasonable and drives nature and is driven by it and wants to and can in fact intercept what he wants. The only thing that man can do is indeed intercept what he wants. This distinction, this full differentiation between the natural and the animal is what leads to the appearance of the soul. And in secular versions, St. John of Damascus will find allies amongst the modern thinkers like Popper, Castoriadis. And here we're not talking about freedom from nature as the Platonizing imagination dreams, but freedom of nature itself, as it is driven by the freedom of the soul. The soul sets nature free. According to paternal tradition, is regarded as immaterial, but in an arbitrary way regarding the denseness of matter, because we are talking about a framework of patristic theology where we don't have the Descartes and Leibniz problem. And neurobiologists repeat today, complaining about how it is that an immaterial substance like the soul can actually have an effect on the material body, since according to Saint Nicodemus, the Hegel says that the soul is the inclination of the existence towards a continuous meaning, which is not private, because it really has to do with everybody else, if you think about it. and it is generated along with them as intermeaningfulness, as I say, of everything in a process of dialectic mutuality, reciprocity, that leads to eschatological, ontological identity to subjects with the participation of Christ, of course, and in Christ. So, man, this natural being on the surface, finds oneself at the sphere of a supernatural, uncreated nature. And of course, this freedom cannot exist at all in artificial intelligence. Regarding the neurobiological unconscious, the origin of unconscious is a remnant of meaning in the discussion on man since ancient times. In metaphysical philosophy, in Plato and especially in Plotinus, we've seen that, and we've seen that in Descartes, Spinoza, Leibniz and Schelling before Edward Ford Hartmann, who came after Freud and talked about it first, cannot be, of course, approached within the framework of this contribution. As I said in the past, the unconscious mind constitutes a substantial feature of an anthropological interpretation that focuses on intersubjectivity in the dialectic and social nature of human desire on one hand, and an unreasonable need for fullness and completeness of the self. In effect, this is precisely what lies beneath the multiple interpretations of what unconscious is all about. This is something that somebody else interprets always. That is the Father Confessor, for instance, or the psychotherapist. I do not interpret it myself. There lies the completion of the existence of the subject. That is the existential destiny, in the sense that the term had in ancient tragedy. Atonement, for instance, is pertinent. A neurobiological version of the unconscious is proof that man, as we'll see, is inhabited by meaning, transcendent meaning, biologically speaking, as we'll see, before man seeks and expresses it. That is, the body is full of meaning in its own right and to begin with. So the existence is found inherently in meaning before this is discovered during a self-awareness process or psychotherapeutic process. Talking about the neurobiological unconscious, we are talking about the proven, mysterious capacity of the brain to understand numbers, words, decisions, situations before they are perceived consciously. So this is something that we don't see in animals or artificial intelligence. I believe that this is yet another proof of the existence of soul through a pre-understanding of things that comes from consciousness which is transcendent, far deeper than any mathematical or algorithmic depiction. This is of great importance. The most prominent experts, Penrose, Foucault, the Greek one, agree that algorithms on which the development of AI is based do not suffice to describe human consciousness. Why is it, you would say? Is it perhaps because the substance of human consciousness is, as we said, human freedom, and the biochemistry of this freedom will never be discovered? Precisely because this is the image of God in man. It is, in that respect, that St. Gregory Palamas, his homily and the presentation of Theotokos, presents the Virgin Mary presentation as the first hesychast, who makes the prayer and alludes to the descent of the nous to the heart. The important thing anthropologically is that with prayer, man discovers, in a sense, the very existence of soul and the nous, the mind. Because it's important, and, of course, we have here Aristotle and nous therathen, that is the external insight, which is free from what is physical and determines the functions of the nous, and it remains free. But as experts say, this nous therathen is a known Platonic remnant in Aristotle, and it is in a Platonic way that it is ontologically relevant to God, delineating the limit between the world and the non-world. In Palamas, there is no ontological relation between the human mind and God, but created mind can accommodate, by the grace of God, many more things. War the nous descends to the body and dwells in the body. And this is something inconceivable for Aristotle or Plato. So we have in the body the ability to rationalize. Rationalization here means sanctification, math, spiritual joy, which is dispersed to the body through the soul. That is, God in his entirety becomes the soul of the soul, and through this it performs theurgy on the body and leads it to immortality without needing Platonic, divine and ontological hyper-ecstasy and transcendence of the soul. For the fathers, as we saw, this is part of the in God's image, and it's not different, ontologically speaking. For all intents and purposes, the biblical patristic definition of man is not tantamount to the soul alone, but the relation between the two things. So we can talk about human and soul, somatopsyche, and we can regard the soul as non-divine and uncreated, but as created and not immaterial, together with the body, by God and in his image. Reflecting his energy. Every dualism that looks for two substances in the human person disappears. There is only one substance, the body and soul of man. Stability and reality of individual soul, which is something that cannot be repeated. It's unique, it's singular, it has a beginning in time, aiming at not falling prey to the decay of the body. This is not a metaphysical soul, but a created biological, non-fully material soul, which survives because of God without ignoring death and being consoled by the Holy Spirit until the time of the resurrection of the dead. We need to surmise that after death and before the ascension of the death, again the soul exists and acts because of the grace of God and interacts with other immaterial beings like the angels, but only the resurrection brings back man in his fullness. Third, the ontological validation for the first time in history of all respectively powers of the soul. And not only the nous, in an ability to work together with the body through which these powers come to be. Let me skip the rest of my presentation, says the speaker. And at this point, we should speak about this deep epistemic property of man. Man can create meta-representations. According to experts, this is our inherent predisposition to construct real versions of our intellectual images and attribute symbols to them. So we have a plethora of new correlations. In its turn, it leads to a multitude of new intellectual, artistic, technical, not only combinations, but discoveries, and it is related to meta-representations. The self-revelation of God can stop the neurobiological production of religions and philosophies. They have value, of course, because they're human quests for truth, but they lead to its refutation. I have finished, said Father Loudovikos. What we said about the freedom of soul means that the whole discussion vis-à-vis artificial intelligence needs to be a discussion regarding human volition, human will. How do we understand human will? In two ways, either in terms of transcendence towards nature, diffused towards the infinite, or it will become a will, a natural will, as it happens with Saint Maximus or Palamas, as a previous speaker said. So that this will can function in the completion of nature in God. The whole discussion in the next few years, whether we like it or not, will go through the question of what human will is and how it works. This will define how artificial intelligence will be used. Thank you very much for your attention.